So Saj, thanks for joining us today. We're going to conduct this video shooting in an interview format. So I'm just going to ask a few questions, and hopefully you can address the big picture of this training. And I want to start off with a question of this work, I want to start off with a question of why is addressing trauma so critical?
Great. Well, Michael, let me first say that why we're doing this video is because you guys just went through a big workshop with us, and we gave you a lot of detailed technical information on working with trauma, or how to address, how to think about stress and trauma. And we wanted to pan back a little bit and represents the big picture here. So in terms of your question, why address trauma? Why is it so critical? I would say that, whether we're talking about therapy in general or specific areas like addiction, the evidence is clear. The research is very clear on this. It's not a question of whether you want to work with trauma or not work with trauma. If you are working with clients, you're working with trauma, right? And when it comes to the field of addiction, we know that the majority of people who have compulsive addictive behavioral patterns, who have that going on for them, also have a very significant trauma history. The number's close to 70%.
So if people come in, the point you're making is people show up on the clinician's couch with a significant trauma history in general. What happens if it's not worked? If we're doing Gestalt therapy or other therapies, but the trauma piece is not addressed?
Well, here's the thing. I think other therapies do address the trauma piece, one way or another. The question is, how directly and efficiently do they address the trauma piece, right? But if it's not addressed at all, then you're doing management, right? You're taking sort of somebody who broke their leg and saying, okay, you're going to have a broken leg for the rest of your life, but here's how you walk with a cane. Right? Here's how you sort of organize your structure around that break, as opposed to saying, let's go to the break and really rework it at that level. Yeah.
Now, is this a new model that you created?
No. Well, actually, let me rephrase that. Yes and no. The model that you guys got exposed to is a synthetic model, meaning we're doing science here. We're taking things from other practices, other approaches, research that really we think work well together and really effectively, efficiently get at working with trauma patterns. So in that sense, it is new, synthetically new. In another sense, it's not new, right? So here's what I mean by that. Remember back to the training, you guys saw the animal models of activation, right? The polar bear that was being hunted by the helicopter, right? What you saw there was, when the drug wore off, was autonomic reactivity, right? It was a fight or flight response where the bear was, his feet were moving like he was running, short, shallow, deep, intense breathing. Basically, what you saw there was an ancient process, right? It's a deep-rooted biological pathway that the mammalian nervous system has used for millions of years to process stress and trauma. Right? So it's just like overheating, right? When our bodies overheat, the nervous system makes us sweat and we cool down. Right? Our body's temperature is regulated by the nervous system. And the same applies to being highly stressed or traumatized. When we become that way, the nervous system has a natural mechanism for releasing that traumatic charge, for cooling us back down. Right? So, and the argument is ultimately, why not take advantage of that? Why use anything else? Right? This mechanism evolved precisely for the purpose of releasing stress and trauma. Why not use it?
So you're bringing us back to really our original state, the state we were meant to be in?
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know if it's the state we were meant to be in, but it's certainly the state that. So we joke here that sometimes we should call this paleo psychotherapy, right? Because we really are referencing something that's been around for millions of years. So yeah, and back to the I guess the question that spawned all this, we are not creating anything new, right? There's no magical therapeutic technique that will cause people to have these responses that you guys experience in the workshop or you saw in the videos, right? What we are doing is helping and teaching the client to get out of their own way, right? We're teaching them to allow this process that I think is utterly beautiful, right? It's effective, it's efficient, it's designed to work that way. And it does. We're not even creating. We're not creating the healing. Even it's always been there. It's an innate mechanism. So that's what we're referencing here.
So you talk about getting out of our own ways, and that's what the training does. What that brings up for me is a question of why is doing the experiential work in the training is important. What piece does that play?
Right. Well, I would say in the workshop as well, and especially the trainings, you can talk about trauma from a theoretical perspective, right? Just like you can talk about dentistry from a theoretical perspective, you can talk about brain surgery, you can talk about a lot of things from a theoretical perspective. But this is such an experiential modality. Working with trauma requires stepping into it, feeling how the nervous system actually works, how it flows, and only from that place can students begin to work with other people, right? That you have to be able to experience it yourself. And also, I would say it's experiential because people wouldn't believe it otherwise. Right? We so identify as being distinctly human with our cognitions and our mental capacities that to think that there's this process that's active underneath it all is kind of it's difficult to believe until you actually experience it.
Yeah, that's great. So let me finish with a final question.
Yeah.
Something I've been curious about. I think about the name of the training. It's the Love and Trauma Training and the Love and Trauma Center. Mm-hmm. And it's obvious what the trauma is about. That's what the training is about, healing trauma. What about the love? Where does that love fit in, and why is it part of the name of your center?
Yeah, what about the love? Well, I would say it's the core, right? You're right. It's the Love and Trauma Center. It's the CAR training, but the whole point is the love, meaning that I think our ability to receive love, to express it, our ability to experience attachment, to trust, to open to oneself, to others, to the world, right? All of that is so the core. It's foundational in terms of how we process trauma, and I think it's ultimately the reason to process trauma. The more that I do psychotherapy, the more I'm convinced that the fundamental process of being here is allowing experience, right? And I think we have the fundamental choice, I should say, is that we can either contract away from experience or we can step into it, allow it, and flow, right? And I think trauma and addiction and a lot of these things that we're talking about here, there is fundamentally a contraction at the heart of these experiences that prevent the traumatized individual, the addict, from experiencing life, from experiencing relationship, from experiencing their own goodness, right? And certainly what I've seen here is that when you drain that charge, when somebody's walking around in the world like an overcharged battery and they're just a reaction to the world, the more you can drain that and have their nervous system enter a state of neutrality, the more that they are able to just experience the world more as it is, experience love, allows them to say yes to relationships, to romantic partners. It allows them to open.
Sounds like as we decrease or diminish the trauma, we increase our capacity to love.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's it. You decrease the trauma, and you open a world of profound resources.
Well, Saj, thank you for being here for tonight's interview. We'll have a few more coming down the road. Thank you.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.